Hello everyone, my name is Gabriel for hotcars.com, and this is the 2021 Volkswagen Jetta GLI, and I'm driving it in the rain. That's why I'm not standing outside talking to you about design, because frankly I don't want to get wet. But we've still got a Jetta GLI to drive, which I think is pretty good, and it still can be pretty fun. And in fact, I think the fact that it is raining is actually going to highlight some of the Jetta's more playful characteristics that you wouldn't really get to experience in the dry. And I mean that because these Jetta GLI, even though it shares the exact same powertrain as the GTI, the hatchback, it's a much more refined and docile kind of car. Now, if you've been watching the channel for any amount of time, you'll know that we tested the 2020 version of the Jetta GLI last year. However, that one had a 6-speed manual transmission, whereas this one has a 7-speed dual clutch automatic, which is incredibly fast. Now, when I learned that I was getting the automatic version, I was actually pretty excited, because even though I had the manual version last year, and I love manual transmissions, I didn't exactly love that specific manual transmission in the GLI, in the tuning that it had and the way it was kind of set up. I felt it was a little too soft, and it wasn't the most precise transmission ever, and it made it a little difficult to drive very quickly. However, the GLI with the dual clutch is a completely different story. This transmission is significantly faster, sharper, and overall, as a daily driver, it's obviously significantly more comfortable. And I think that goes along with the entire aura of this car. Now, as a quick refresher, in case you're not super deep into this Volkswagen world, the GTI develops 228 horsepower and 258 pounds-feet of torque, exactly the same as what this GLI developed. Now, it is worth mentioning that there is a brand new version of the GTI on its way to the US market as we speak, but that doesn't mean there is going to be a brand new GLI relatively soon, because this model's only been out for a few years. So expect a couple more refreshes before there is a complete switchover to the new generation. However, that isn't necessarily a bad thing, because even though there is a brand new GTI, it isn't really all that different in terms of powertrain from the current, or I guess now previous generation, Mark 7 GTI. But back to the GLI. Even though it is the same exact powertrain as the GTI is a relatively longer car, and for the most part, it's a little bit softer, it's a little bit more comfortable than the GTI on the road. I kind of look at this car almost like a relaxed version of the GTI, and you kind of get a sense of that all throughout the interior. It almost feels like a mini Audi S4. That was my sentiment when I drove this car last year, and I feel like it's even stronger now with the addition of this automatic transmission. And I mean that because it's very sort of relaxed. It's almost like luxury-esque when you're driving around town, very quiet, very comfortable, very sort of refined. But then when you hit a couple downshifts, and it's just quick, and in this rain, when you put your foot down, you're basically getting spinning. The front wheels simply can't really grip. Obviously, I have traction off because it's just a little bit more fun. But for the most part, it does have a little bit of that Audi flavor, and I think that sort of sharing between the brands also carries to the interior, because you're going to notice that digital instrument cluster in front of me, which is an optional extra, looks very similar to what you'd get out of an Audi. The layout is very similar, and even some of the fonts, you can tell it does feel a bit on the Audi side. Now, I will say that the standard version of the GLI that gets the analog gauges and the smaller screen does not carry that vibe, and that does feel very Volkswagen. But if you opt for the tech extras, then it does kind of feel a little bit more Audi-ish. Now, speaking of this screen I absolutely love. The colors, the quality is very high. Obviously, you get Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. That's pretty standard across the industry, and we get that here. Now, bezel aside, I also really love the graphics that are used in this infotainment screen, because you get red accents throughout, which really match the other red accents you have throughout the car, because we have red stitching, the digital dash, the gauges when you're in sport mode, they're red. So it's all tied in really nicely. And I like that because it's very cohesive. It seems very well thought out. So let's talk about my favorite part about the Jetta GLI, and that is how it drives. And I'm not talking about just at high speed, but I'm talking about around town as well. And I think all of that really comes from this 7-speed dual clutch automatic, because it's incredibly quick. Downshifts are very fast. I would argue that they're faster than the last GTI I drove. It feels very, very, very quick, which I think is great in terms of making use of the low-end torque that that engine has to offer. So sort of in summary, the GLI feels much faster than those horsepower figures would suggest. Now there is a downside, and I have to demonstrate it to you. If I downshift a second and I put my foot down, you saw that? It upshifted on its own. It didn't let me get to redline to shift it myself. So the car will always upshift for you. Even if you're in the sportiest setting with the sportiest whatever you can get, the car will always upshift for you, which I don't know. I kind of would like the car to let me handle it myself. We've got a rev limiter, so it's not like I'm gonna damage the car, by taking it to redline. But it's just something that I noticed that I didn't really quite like. Now, one thing I will say is that, when you get the manual, you don't have to deal with that because you're the person controlling all the shifts, so you get to decide when you shift up. Now, it might be raining, but I'm gonna give you a quick launch in the Jetta GLI just so you can kind of get a taste of what it's like in the rain. So, foot on the brake, foot hard on the gas. Yeah, and it's quick. It's so quick. I feel like, like I said earlier, it does feel much more powerful and quicker than its horsepower figures would suggest. And I think it's the dual clutch. Dual clutch makes it feel like it's got at least another 40 or 50 horsepower under the hood that it really doesn't. But again, it's all about that low end torque. Let's go again. Yeah, I love the way like the dashboard, all the graphics react very quickly. Can downshift. It's almost instantaneous. I will say the upshift isn't as aggressive as the downshift, but the downshift is it's perfect, and I love that. Now that I've told you the good, let's talk about the bad, because as you might imagine, every single car has its drawbacks, and this car is no stranger to that. Well, actually, let's take this corner first. So even in the rain, there's so much grip. You can power out, just foot to the floor. You're good. This car has so much low end torque, it's great. But back to those drawbacks. The first thing I don't like actually are the seats. I feel the seats, even though they're nicely trimmed, black leather with red stitching, they're great. I don't think they're very comfortable. I don't find myself getting comfortable in this car. I've driven this car over long distances and I end up feeling kind of tired and kind of uncomfortable. My legs get kind of numb. Just overall not the most comfortable driving experience. I feel the seats in the GTI are significantly nicer and significantly more comfortable than this. However, you don't get as aggressive bolstering as you do in the GTI because this again is a little bit more docile, a little softer than the GTI. That's kind of how I would see it. But for the most part, yeah, see, there's grip everywhere. This road is soaking wet and the GLI just doesn't care. It just says, we are going to grip today. Now, my second drawback, actually, we're gonna hear right now because we're getting onto the highway, and that is road noise. I feel this car develops a bit too much road noise, in my opinion. Look, I'll put it into drive, and we'll go into the modes. We'll put it into comfort. We'll go into the cushiest, softest, most relaxed setting this car has to offer. And admittedly, the suspension, very, very comfortable in this mode. The throttle inputs are very relaxed to help you save fuel. And also the engine quiets down because remember, there's sound being piped into the cabin, which I like. It makes things a little bit more exciting. I'm not against that at all. But in this comfort mode, all of that goes away and you get the quietest driving experience the Jetta GLI has to offer. And there's road noise. There's a considerable amount of road noise. I feel like after a while on the highway, it could get a little annoying. There isn't a whole lot of wind noise, which is good, but we do get a lot of tire noise. And I mean, that could be something as much as a tire choice or the wheel choice, but in this configuration, as it comes from the factory, there is a little bit of road noise, which again, I didn't necessarily love. So now that the rain has given us a break, I can show you around the 2021 Jetta GLI because this is a very good looking car. And starting with this red line in the front grille, if you've seen previous generations of the GTI, you'll know that that is very similar to those GTI. It's a nice little touch and it's a nice connection between the GLI and the GTI. Overall, I think this red color is probably the best color on offer for this model. I know we tested that gray car last year and it was really nice. It's sort of like Nardo gray, but I think this red one is the way. And this one has gloss black wheels in the front and in the rear, which I think, again, are very nice. They're exactly the same size as the other GLI that we tested, but I think the contrast between red and black and all of the gloss black accents, like the roof, the front grille, it's a very nice touch, and the design is very, very cohesive. Overall, this looks different enough from a standard Jetta to really justify that extra price tag, and the fact that it is a special model, because again, it's not like the sort of a Jetta with some sort of little extras here and there. It really does look special enough. Now, moving on to the rear end, this looks very sort of Jetta as usual, but you do get a little gloss black spoiler at the top. You have this nice little diffuser, which is not the most aggressive in the world, but it's a little bit more aggressive than the standard model, and I think it looks very good. It sets the GLI apart. You have dual exhaust tips. They are a little small and they're a little sunken in, but then again, this car is not really too over the top. I think the cohesiveness between the front and the rear, it's nicely tied in together. You can definitely tell it's a Jetta, but you can definitely tell it's also a special Jetta at that. Now, I know I touched on the engine and the driving portion, but let me tell you exactly what we're dealing with. It's a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine with 228 horsepower, 258 pound-feet of torque. Remember, you can have a 7-speed dual clutch automatic or a 6-speed manual transmission. This one has the dual clutch automatic, and ultimately it's my favorite of the two transmissions. I know we're all save the manuals, but I think this automatic is probably the best way to go. Overall, in terms of fuel economy, if you keep it in your sort of plushy comfort mode, you might get some decent mileage, but once you put your foot down, it is pretty thirsty, so just keep that in mind. But overall, this is one heck of an engine, and no wonder it exists in the GTI, it exists in the new GTI, the old GTI, in the Golf R. We get variations of this engine in all sorts of places, and it's a very, very robust powertrain. I know Volkswagens have had reliability issues in the past, but this engine is of no concern. I personally owned a car with this engine and did, several thousands and thousands of miles without a single issue, so I would trust this engine absolutely without a doubt. So there we have it, the 2021 Volkswagen Jetta GLI. Well, it might not be the world's most sort of value-driven car. There's a lot of fun on offer, but again, remember, this is a little bit softer than the GTI, so if you want ultra sporty, you're going to want the GTI. If you want a more comfortable but fun daily driver, then you want the GLI. Either way, there's no wrong way to go. These are great products with great engines and great engineering, and overall ones that I really, really do like. So with that, I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you guys like this video and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you again very soon.